Hey folks, well today's video is going to be what I look for when I'm out hiking. What do I look for as far as resources? What am I thinking when I'm out in the woods? Just what do I notice? Stuff like that. I wrote a little post on Facebook a little bit ago that I called it the stash. And basically what I mean by that is everybody should have, when you're out in the woods or even in your house or whatever, I feel like you should have a stash of resources. And that may seem obvious to some folks and stuff, but basically if you're out in the woods, you should always have more wood than what you're going to use. You should try and have more calories than what you're going to use. Now whether you bring that from home or whether you find that when you're out in the woods, it doesn't matter. You should have more gear than what you think you're going to use. You should always have a stockpile of resources just in case something bad happens. Now it doesn't have to be like super paranoid, crazy type stuff. It can be just a small emergency kit. Or, and in addition to that, a stockpile of resources in the woods that you may or may not gather. You notice them. You see, there's some wood there that I could collect if I need it, and then you continue on your journey. There's a resource right there that I could use if I needed it, but I'm going to continue on my journey. Whatever. You're looking for good emergency campsites. You're looking for just everything that you've been training or learning, you pick out into the woods. So the first thing that I notice is I have some cattails over here to the left of me. I've got a swamp. This is a creek that runs through my property. Cattails, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some wild edibles expert. I've studied them a little bit. They're hard for me to learn. There's just so many plants out there, it's just hard to learn. But one thing I know about the cattail, a few things I know about the cattail, obviously, and we're talking about this time of year, the head is good for flash tinder. If you find a head that hasn't exploded yet, it's a good ember carrier, a good coal extender. If it weren't this time of year, I could definitely dig down and find some roots, but unfortunately my ground's probably frozen about 2 feet deep. What do I see? I'm walking along. It's just a random weed top. Good for fire, right? I've got some swamp grass. This swamp grass is a good insulator. I've slept on it before. It's good in tinder bundles. Folks use it for thatching or whatever, for like the roof on your shelter, insulation in your shelter. I'm not saying it's easy to gather, because you can see this stuff on video and sometimes it looks easy, especially depending on how the person edits it. Gathering this grass right now is a pain in the rear end. It's much easier in the summertime, or actually it's easier in the spring to fall when everything's dead. But you got to kick all the snow off it. You got to get down to the bottom. If you harvest it with your knife, it's going to dull your knife rather quickly, but it's better than pulling on it and getting sores in your hands. So this is what I mean by the grass. It's hard to harvest. You're going to have to kick off all the snow, which it's not bad right now, but you got to kick off this snow, and then you can get down in there and harvest that stuff with your knife. Real basic stuff. I'm seeing, some live stuff obviously, but then some dead stuff. Definitely good kindling. I wouldn't necessarily consider it fuel, but you'll definitely get a fire going. So, alright, we're only a little ways away from the house, so let's keep going. Here's a small aspen sapling, and I'm going to rub my hand on it. You can see the powder. We'll go take a look at the creek here in a minute. I'm sure it's probably froze over, although it's been pretty warm. It's like 32 right now or something. But one thing I failed to mention about the creek, it's pretty obvious that it will give you water. But it's also a highway in the wintertime. That ice, when it freezes, is just like a road for these animals. They can just cruise down it fast, not a lot of energy expended, and it's a fertile trapping area. If the animals are out and about. I can see right now, I can see a mullein stalk. Once again, the mullein is and here's some, pretty sure that's burdock, but the mullein is something that's going to grow in, like what they consider wasteland or just fields. It's not going to grow super deep into the woods, but the stalk I can use for a hand drill, although I've never been successful at it. I've been semi-close, but I guess I haven't really, I've practiced a few times, but not out of this world. I had the wrong hearth board. I plan to revisit that, but I have used it in a bow drill, obviously thicker than that piece that I just saw, but I've smoked the leaves. The leaves do tend to expand the, I don't even know what it's called, but when you smoke like tobacco, it kind of constricts your lungs or constricts the, I don't know if they're called bronchioles or what they are, in your lungs, but when you smoke mullein, it will open it up. I know folks have made cough medicines out of it. I will say that being I'm not a smoker anymore. I've quit for a long time, but I definitely know when I've smoked mullein because my lungs do hurt a little bit in the morning, but I've never smoked it when I was sick. I haven't been sick for, thank goodness, for a long time as far as lung issues go. But I've got good friends that said they've smoked it when they were sick and that they definitely felt better when they were done. So we're almost over here to the creek. So it's flowing there pretty good. It's got a little bit of ice on it. I certainly wouldn't trust to walk on it. Not right now when the current's that fast right there, and then plus with the lack of cold that we've had. I don't see any tracks on it right now, but we just got this snow. It literally just stopped snowing. It's snowing a little bit, but so what do I have there? All right, let's go check it out. So when I see something like this, I immediately think punkwood. I think fuel, depending on how far gone it is. But I think punkwood. I think how squishy is this stuff? It would definitely char. Whether it would take an ember straight off the ferro rod, I doubt, but it would definitely char. It's not quite as punky as what I would like, but I didn't check every last bit of it either. This would char though for sure. So I'm looking at all these saplings and I'm thinking structure material. Believe me, get out and, I mean, if you haven't already, get out and try some of this stuff. Just because I say it's shelter material, I'm not saying it's going to be easy to make a nice shelter out of this stuff. The snow that we got just now is a fairly heavy snow, so it would, well, you can see it. See how it's clinging onto the brush? So you could make a frame, cut these little saplings down, and line your, use it for material over the roof or whatever, and then scoop some snow over the top of it. You definitely wouldn't want to have a fire, otherwise you'd have a leaky roof all over you, but I mean, it's certainly something that could potentially save your life. Certainly something you could do. What do I have here? Certainly a place I don't want to camp under. Widowmaker type deal here. Broken fuel. This is definitely fuel here. And dogs I could eat. An important thing that I haven't really heard mentioned too much is look behind you. If you get disoriented and you never look behind you, all you're going to remember are very key landmarks, and that's about it. You're not going to remember how the trail looks on the return trip. Always take a few minutes every so often, look behind you. Just kind of stop, and take a look around. Just take a breather. I'm not saying you have to go slow enough to stalk a deer. I'm just saying, don't blindly walk through the woods. Pay attention to it. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on camera, but I can tell this is a deer trail. I can tell that some deer have walked through here. Now, whether that was recently, it certainly wasn't today, but definitely some animals have crossed through here. And I say deer trail because that's mostly what I have on my land. And I can see what looks to be hoof prints, and just the gait of it I can kind of tell. Okay, so we got a pretty good sized oak tree here. Way back in the day they had a deer stand up there before I ever bought the property, but you can see the dead limbs coming off the side there. There's one on the ground. There's one up there. Okay, there's some fallen stuff on the ground here. We'd have to look at it and see how soaked it was. Normally in the wintertime in my area it's not that bad because everything freezes rather than soaking up the moisture. But that would definitely be a good, hot, perhaps long-lasting fire, or longer than just burning aspen. But for sure a good cooking fire. And you can see there's a limb right there that's fallen. That'd be dry. A lot of those would be dry. I purposely kind of waited a little bit until I was in this area. But if you look around, there's nothing but birch trees everywhere. And like I said, I'm talking about this time of year. I'm out right now. I'm not talking about 3 months from now when the sap's running, or you know, whatever, or if I happen to pawn chaga or whatever. I'm talking about right now. What would this be good for? Well, I've seen folks on TV that actually relish eating the inner bark of this birch tree. I've done it. It's super bitter. I've never cooked it. I think that probably might be better. Maybe even boiling it or something and changing the water. I don't know. But it is some strong tasting stuff. But obviously the bark is extremely flammable. And I can see, it's hard to see with that snow on top, but that looks like a polypore, birch polypore. I've stropped my knife on that, and actually I can see right up there. Not that it does me any good up there, but I can certainly be on the lookout for it. Let's see, where's it at? That right there, excuse the dog, sorry. But that right there looks like a horse hoof fungus to me. And the birch polypore, it's good for stropping my knife. And the horseshoe fungus is good for carrying an ember. I've done it, I've sawed it up right off the tree and was able to obtain a flint and steel fire. Not easily, but it worked. Let's take a look over here. So right here I can see, I don't know what kind of tree that is. It's too hard to see with the snow on it. I don't know if that's a popple or what we call popple, which is aspen, or if it's an oak. But there's definitely ridgepole material there. Fuel, because it's been dead for a while. And I know that just because I know this is my property. I can see right now what perhaps, that's the root ball, but that's perhaps what, a windbreak, a fire reflector, depending on if I put a platform across it, perhaps I could use that for a shelter area. It could possibly be a reflector or at least a windbreak. One thing I will say about these root balls is, like I just said, my ground is frozen. But with these root balls, they carry rocks with them, okay? So I can use that rock, I can use it for, you know, a hammer if I needed to. Obviously not with my knife, but I could use it for a hammer. I could use it to, as a hammer stone. You know, using it for a hammer stone, finding another rock and using that for a cutting tool. If I happen to find, quartz is fairly common in my area, that'd be good for flint and steel. And like I've shown in my other video, what did I title that one? No flint, no problem. It doesn't have to be quartz, doesn't have to be flint or chert or anything like that. It can just be a random rock that has some properties, you know. Alright, well, I'm heading back now. And this was just a real short hike just to kind of get out and mess around a little bit. But in going along with the theme of, you know, always have a stash or something, most of my videos I do on my property, and all the trees that I cut down, most of the trees I cut down are on my property. I do not have a problem cutting down aspen trees because they grow like weeds. Now oak trees, birch trees, pine trees, cedar trees, whatever, more trees that take longer to grow and that are not as plentiful, I really pay attention to whether I'm cutting them down or not. But with my stash here, I've got a lot of oak trees on my property. Do I want to go sit there and cut them all down just because they're good firewood? No. They bring in deer, they bring in game. They're probably a couple hundred years old or whatever. That's not to be taken lightly. But if I needed it, if a meteor hit the earth and I couldn't find firewood somewhere, or if the economy dropped off, something, I've got a lot of trees on my property I could harvest. Mostly I buy my firewood. Why do I buy my firewood? Just like what I said, because I keep that in reserve. That's my savings account. These trees are my savings account. I know where they are. I know where there's chaga on my property. That doesn't mean I go out and harvest it all the times. It means that I save it. Same thing when you're out in the woods. You know, if it's not your property. Just because it's there doesn't mean I need to harvest it. I remember where it's at. I've got a stash of fat wood somewhere. It's not as good as the folks down south have, but I've got it stashed somewhere, and it's in the woods where most people, especially around me, probably don't even know what it is, or if they do know what it is, it's a pain to harvest, so they're going to leave it alone. I harvested some 3, 4, 5 years ago. I went back and looked at it, looked just like after I left it. I don't need to harvest that anymore. I know where it's at. And, you know, if somebody else comes and harvests it, that's fine. You don't keep all your eggs in one basket. You have multiple, and I don't want to say caches, but you could have multiple you could have a cache. My caches are more out in the open. You don't mess with it. You leave it alone. So looking right here, this tree's a little bit big, but there's another tree there, and there's a birch back there. There's, I don't know if that's a baby oak or what, but I see a lot of walking sticks, and not really even walking sticks. What I mean by that is, you know, like a walking stick / frog gig / whatever else you wanted it to be. Do I need a frog gig this time of year? No, there's no reason for me to cut that down. But, I mean, if you lived in an area where it had nothing but absolutely huge mature trees, you might want to remember where that sapling is. So I don't know how well that's showing up. You probably can't positively identify it from a video, but rest assured that's chaga. I'm not going to harvest that chaga. I've known that chaga's been there for a long time, or for a while anyway, and there's no reason for me to harvest it. I have some at home. Let's just leave it. It should get bigger and bigger. It's actually a nice chunk. Not super big, but it'll get bigger and bigger. There's no reason for me to harvest it. That's part of my stash. Part of something that I know where it's at. And nobody else does. Except you guys. I can see a nice dead birch in front of me that's got just a ton of horseshoe fungus on it. Now it's out of reach, but there's a nice branch that is broken off. Normally, birch trees rot. They don't usually just up and die, standing dead or anything like that. Usually around my area they rot, so it's hard to find a standing good birch tree. Birch will work for a bow drill, but like I said, it's hard to find a good standing one. But you can see a nice limb has broken off of that tree. So I can see the woodpecker's been messing with it, so I can tell it's punky. Once again, we got punkwood there. And then plus towards the end there, I think that that would be a good candidate for a bow drill fire. I'd have to look at it, of course, but the horseshoe fungus is, or horse hoof, I always call it horseshoe. Horse hoof fungus is way up there. Not exactly easily accessible, but I mean, if you absolutely needed to for some reason, you could get a stick or something and pop it loose. That one's not that high up. Maybe 10 feet, maybe 12 feet. So there's some horsehoof fungus way down low, and it's quite dry, quite dead. This is a dead birch tree, so why anybody would harvest live bark off a live tree other than making a container or something is beyond me. A lot of dead bark there. Here's some cattail heads that haven't 100% exploded yet. The one on the left here, right there, is a little better than some of the others. But we've got lamp wicking material. We've got insulation for our shoes. We've got insulation for our gloves, maybe. Sure, you're going to get fuzz everywhere, but I don't really care about getting fuzz, you know, on my clothes or whatever. If I need some insulation in my shoes, I'm harvesting that cattail. Basically what I wanted to convey is kind of a little bit of my methodology when I go out into the woods. I'm looking for what I can harvest. What can I use? What is going to be beneficial to me in a bad situation or even in a good situation? Does that mean I'm harvesting it? Absolutely not. It may be my stash, so to speak. It may be a resource that I say, I know that's there. Am I going to use it? No. Or I might just use one or two to practice with. But I'm not going to completely deplete that resource, and I'm going to keep that resource in the back of my head. It could be an area like mine where it's my own property, or it can be just your favorite spot into the woods, or it can be the very first time you've ever been there. It's just, oh hey, look at that, there's this there, or that's that there, and I know it's 50 feet off the trail right here, or whatever, you know. It's something to keep in the back of your mind. It's got a nice pine tree right here. It's got some pitch on it, I'm sure. The resources are there. They don't have to be harvested. You keep them in the back of your mind. You know what they can do, or you're learning. My methodology when I walk into the woods, I'm always looking for all different things. I see there's a dead pine tree right there. There's not a lot on my property. There's good boughs for a shelter, insulation, whatever. That's what I'm looking for. I'm enjoying nature, but also looking at what I can use if I need to, what I can use if I want to, how to harvest it correctly, and for sustainability, and all that, all wrapped into one, means fun in the woods for me. That's how I have fun. I love learning about this stuff. I love using my knowledge, applying my knowledge, and learning more things, and keeping an eye out for stuff. Like here, I've used these. I believe this is a I can't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember if it's a goldenrod or what, but this is a bobber. I've used these for bobbers before. Okay. All right, on that note, I'm gonna go back and eat something and kick back. All right guys, hope you liked the video. Take care.